So, I make it about 2:03. I'm going to try and keep this to 45 minutes. I know I don't want to get in the way of our coffee break afterwards. I tend to talk fast and get excited, so I'm, if I'm going too crazy, please don't hesitate to try and slow me down. This slide was anybody at Symphony Live in Berlin? No, okay, so I have a slide with audio and there wasn't a cable, and so that was very awkward. Joined in. This is this talk on Joined In. I'd welcome your feedback, and I enjoy constructive criticism. This is the alpha release. This is the third time I've done a version of this talk. It's things I've been thinking about over the last few months. Idealism is Code, from philosophy to empowerment. We could have a quick example of what idealism expressed as code is. Who's familiar with how many American citizens are in the room? How many non-American citizens are in the room? So the United States Constitution is a very idealistic document. It's a bunch of statements about how the so-called founding fathers of the country thought people should live. It's imperfect. I believe personally that it's certain parts of it are outdated and the application is at times challenging, but it's very idealistic, and there's a piece in there that says citizens have the right to petition their government, that we have the right to express our desire for things to change. In 1800, before there were railways, before there was any effective fast means of transport across most of a continent, it was very, very hard to do this. It's been very, very hard to do this throughout history, petition the government. It's been very hard to implement. Well, now we have, in this case, Drupal. And this is a Drupal application, and it's on GitHub, and it's a piece of government infrastructure that allows citizen participation. Citizens can request that the government make meaningful change. At this time, the government, when a petition reached more than 25,000 signatures, the government promised to respond to that. One of the real-world changes that this particular petition affected is that now the We the People application requires 100,000 signatures before the government will answer. The government's response to this was also great. The first line of it said, "This is not the petition response you're looking for." I'm a Drupal guy. There are a lot of Drupal examples. My title at work is Open Source Evangelist. I happen to work a lot in the Drupal trenches. Please bear with me. I believe that most of what I'm saying applies to all of us here. And I am thrilled, by the way. Thank you, PHP Architect, for inviting me to this first PHP World. I'm really, really excited about what's going on in open source in general, but very, very especially in PHP, and how, it's actually meaningful for us to be talking together now. It's fantastic. So, Idealism is Code. There was a huge tornado in Oklahoma City last year, last May, I believe, and DrupalCon was going on. 70 people at DrupalCon decided to get together and do something about this. They wanted to help people. So, I guess a lot of us had computers when we were kids, and I'm old enough so that the computer that I had at home, it was, green characters on a black background or black characters on an orange background to begin with, and it was pretty abstract and relatively interesting, but it was a kind of little encapsulated thing, and if you wanted to get something new or change something, of course you had to go drive somewhere and get tapes or discs or whatever. Now we write code, and it's still looks very abstract, right? But we can effectively create government infrastructure. 70 people got together and hacked for, I think, about 24 hours in Portland, and put together this responsive application for people wanting to offer help to their community and for people who needed help from their community. And since it's open source, it's out there, it can be repurposed and retooled. And so we as open source practitioners, we are helping our government and helping our citizens, our communities around us with code and having a real effect, giving someone, a bed for the night and food and shelter and getting them to, find their family members, whatever it is. That's kind of amazing, okay? So as part of the LAMP stack, and I'm reading mostly from my session description from a few months ago, PHP is a dominant web technology, and it's getting more powerful all the time. Convergence through things like Composer and the PSR standards is bringing once disparate communities together. How many Drupalists are in the room? Hey, people. Joomla? Come on, stick your hands up. WordPress people? Magento, Laravel. All right. Hey, Symfony? All right. And stuff that I haven't mentioned that is PHP, I'm quit cutting the list here. Multiple meta projects like Drupal 8 are adopting code from around PHP and open source spheres, and contribution to one has become contribution to whole ecosystems, all right? That's kind of amazing. By the end of this talk, I want all of us, as the empowered practitioners building the web, building the next generation of digital interconnected technologies, I want us to be thinking about building our products, projects, and businesses in ways that empower all of us to make the world a better place. Salient points that I'm going to be circling around during this talk. Digital rights are now human rights. We are very, very privileged, and we're gatekeepers and controllers of this technology that sooner or later will run everything for a given value of everything. And I believe that we have responsibility to enable others less technical than ourselves to enjoy freedom and privacy and security. And we should be building applications and websites and objects that are safe and secure and private by default and easy and compelling to use. The civilian user doesn't get RTFM, okay? I'm sorry. This is who I am. I have a very nice title. I'm very, very happy with it. This job has grown around me to some extent. I'm pretty easy to find on the web. Have a lot of podcasts up. I have a lot of stuff on YouTube. I realize that I need to get my slides onto Speaker Deck now. I will be doing that soon enough. I'm on Twitter. There's my email. Right now, I am involved in Movember. This started as a Movember project 2 years ago, but at this point, I can't bring myself to shave it off. I will talk to you briefly about Movember right at the end of my talk. I work for a little company called Acquia. We're venture capital funded Drupal products and services company, and it is a privilege to me to work for a company that contributes huge amounts to open source in terms of code, in terms of paying a guy to talk about open source in public and much more. So that's where I work. How many of you are service providers and you build web stuff for clients? How many of you work within an organization on their, digital web stuff? It's all this, that's interesting. Okay, so how many, okay, who's looking for a job? Who would put their hand up but their boss is sitting next to them? Okay, and who's hiring right now? Yeah, that's challenging, isn't it? So we have to make some more. We have to make more devs, I think. Who's got a startup or like a side project? Side projects, they're good. Okay, cool. I have one too. Big reveal in a couple of weeks. Who contributes to open source? Thank you very much. Now, for the people who didn't put your hands up, all right? I'm gonna ask a few questions. If it applies to you, put your hand up, then hold it, okay? So who writes code, submits patches, pull requests, does all that kind of developer stuff? Contributing to open source projects, thank you. Who tests patches? Who's filed a bug report ever? Who's ever downloaded open source software and come to open source events? Okay, actually, this is important to remember. We're all contributors to open source, and all of those things and a lot more help make our projects better. And thank you all for contributing. So, a great friend and colleague of mine is sitting in the audience and doesn't know that a video of her is about to play. Take the word Drupal when Angie says it, and picture PHP, picture open source, hear the word you want to hear. I truly believe this applies to all of us. So this is my idea about the fact that we have to make things for the non-technical user to be empowered.
I think the real power in Drupal and what I get excited about in that sort of work is, essentially what we do as Drupal developers is we make really abstract, complicated, programming concepts accessible to non-developers. When we write things like the views module, you can do very sophisticated queries and charts and maps and all kinds of things just by clicking a few buttons without having to understand all the code that comes underneath it. So what I get really excited about is the idea that Drupal, and particularly Drupal 8, could be this vehicle through which we create really easily accessible, things that could be piped through a mobile application or usable on the internet, and used as a tool to help those people who are on the front lines trying to make the world a better place, and we could build technology to enable that.
Thanks for that. A lot of us in open source, I think a common thread is that we're idealists. And I think that we're in a continuum, a line of idealistic communities. I mentioned the US Constitution. It's a very, very idealistic document. I believe that, as I said, its current application is not always what it could be. So the First Amendment, along with some other things, as I mentioned, it gives us the right to petition the government. We're doing that with open source. That's pretty cool. Here's something I just want us to think about. The Fourth Amendment says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. And no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. You all know what I'm talking about, right? This is not really happening right now, and I consider it a problem. And I don't think that it's fair to have a secret court writing a secret document saying that the place that shall be searched is the entire internet and every storage device connected to it. So, we have some things to work on. Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, made a speech, the equivalent of the State of the Union address now in 1941, and he defined his 4 freedoms: the freedom of speech, the freedom of worship, the freedom from want, which is a lovely old way to say that I sometimes have to explain to non-native English speakers, and the freedom from fear. And these 4 freedoms eventually became part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was adopted by the United Nations in 1948. It's pretty cool. Fast forward a few years. Oh, I have an apology to make. The session description for this session, I wrote RSM as a typo, and of course, this is RMS. So, who knows who that is, RMS? Yeah, it's a guy called Richard Stallman. And he made an incredibly important to us idealistic statement. It's called the free software definition. The word free in our name does not refer to price, it refers to freedom. And there were 2 freedoms. The freedom to copy a program and redistribute it, and the freedom to change it so that you can control it instead of it controlling you. And we hold these truths to be self-evident, right? The freedom 0 was added later. The freedom to run the program was made explicit. I don't like this formulation because I find these 2 statements a bit redundant. The freedom to redistribute copies so you can help your neighbor is great, but then the freedom to redistribute copies of your modified versions seems... Anyway, formulation's not perfect. It's very, very, very important to what we do, right? When I give talks to other audiences, I end up defining our 4 freedoms as the freedom to use it, the freedom to study it, the freedom to modify it, and the freedom to share it. I'll talk a little bit about how I use this expression of the four freedoms later as we go along. Who knows who that is? Really? A guy called Bruce Perens. He got together with Tim O'Reilly and some other people, and he made this thing called open source, which was like a version of free software, and it's the world we're living in. It is a pragmatic vision that essentially more or less states that proprietary software and free software have to be able to live together, and we're going to do these things. And it was kind of an emphasis on business, and that's good. I'm paying my rent with open source software, so that's great, actually. Who gets into the weeds and the issue queues in open source? Right? So this is the open source definition that Bruce Perens wrote, originally as part of the Debian project, and now at you can find this at opensource.org/OSD, right? So I kind of love this. There's nothing, they don't say anything wrong in this, but you know, this just looks to me like the freedom to bike shed. It's pretty awesome. And I think that Richard actually had it in 2 sentences originally. It's good though, it's worth understanding, it's worth reading this. However, so I'm quoting from an article from a very long time ago. Unlike new creator Richard Stallman, Perens believes that free software and non-free retail software can coexist. Perens' software universe consists of 3 paradigms: traditional retail software, in-house development software, and open source. There's nothing wrong with this model. I believe that we have done Richard Stallman a great disservice over the last couple decades. He's been, you know, an amusing figure at times, but he's really, really right. The freedom really, really matters. So, and I got to thinking about this much, much more than I had in the past. I got to do this interview with Tux Machines, and I kept stumbling over exactly how I was going to write it, and so eventually I wrote a little disclaimer that says, you know, if I say free and open source software, if I say open source, if I say free Libre, I more or less mean the whole thing. But I felt a little bit guilty about it, and I was reading some more. And the Free Software Foundation, so Richard Stallman's foundation, they've actually got my back on this one. I'm really grateful for it. They say, the term open source software is used by some people to mean more or less the same category as free software. It is not exactly the same class of software. However, skipped a couple lines. However, the differences in extension of the category are small. Nearly all free software is open source, and nearly all open source software is free. So, whew, I'm okay. Who knows that logo? Wow, I can tell we're on the East Coast somehow. What is it? Oh, yeah. I had somebody last week say that was Tesla, which was kind of a good guess. Look at this. 10 Principles of Burning Man. This really speaks to me as an open source practitioner. You know, radical self-reliance, radical inclusion, communal effort, civic responsibility, participation. This is a great statement of principles, and this is also grown out of the practices of the Burning Man community. This wasn't declared, and they didn't then, you know, magically make the festival based on this. This came out of this community really, really living and expressing these things. And I think that the practices of open source, the practices that derive from all these years of doing this, they feel really, really similar to me. So, very briefly, I just want to give some examples of how I talk about open source with other audiences. I start with this as a base, with these 4 freedoms, and talk about how they de-risk certain situations, how you can make better informed decisions, how you can be sure that you're secure, how you can make your perfect tools, and how you can either build a business with those things, or you can, you know, share it with anyone else doing the same thing and help them along and get their contribution too, right? And everybody does better with it. Who knows this book, Democratizing Innovation? It came out a long time ago, and this guy basically predicted everything that's happened with open source software. And the one paradigm that's so fascinating here is he talks about the old world where you have manufacturers who make something and broadcast it to consumers who use it, and you're done, right? And he talks about the one example that's kind of interesting is windsurfing. Some people bought some sails and some people had and surfboards and hacked them together, right? And they made windsurfing, and now it's an industry. But you see, this was open sourcing these parts essentially, and the power that we get in open source is that we use the tools that we make and we perfect them, and every time we use them, they get better. And this is just incredibly empowering. And this is a real eye-opener for a lot of people who haven't been dealing with this kind of stuff. And I highly, highly recommend this book. Lawrence Lessig, the inventor of Creative Commons, wrote another very short book called One Way Forward. It's also quite interesting. He talks about the corrupting effect of money in politics, not bribery, but the fact that there's too much money in the system. I like this statement: open source provides the fastest possible rate of improvement for ideas. And, you know, open source has been around now for a while, and our way of thinking, our way of doing things, I really, really think we're actually affecting the outside world, not just in building applications, but in affecting how people think. And the one thing that really touched me in this book, I'm convinced this is cutting out. Am I crazy?
We can hear you.
Okay. The thing that really touched me was when he was writing the book, it was simultaneously the height of the Tea Party political movement and of the Occupy Wall Street movement, and he interviewed representatives of both, and both groups, that's where they are on the political spectrum, right? Both groups told him they were open source political movements. That's pretty fascinating. So, I use this slide a lot. In fact, I can do a whole talk just with this slide. It's great for explaining, though, how open source empowers us and our clients and our communities, because as soon as you have a license fee of 0, you can do so much more for yourself, and you're so empowered to take control. And at this point, I talk a lot about it's not free. Never tell anyone it's free in terms of, you know, your clients are going to be really disappointed if they're thinking that their IT projects are going to be for free. It does come at a price of $0, and that's really, really helpful. And from these 3 bits of information, so the open source definition and a couple others, I'll talk about at length with businesses about how they can be more innovative, they can save costs, they can be more efficient, and they can mitigate risk, which I consider criteria for successful businesses today. I've been speaking at a lot of government events this year, which is really, really neat. You go to places like the UK, and local governments are going crazy for digital technologies. They've heard of open source. They're doing a lot with it, and you get fantastic. They've done enough that they're all excited about it. There's actual data that shows they can govern better with fewer resources using our open source technologies. So I get to explain to them how, you know, collaboration, transparency, citizen participation, and innovation can go hand in hand with our technologies. And they're so, especially in the UK right now, they're incredibly excited about this. The Australian government just adopted a version of Drupal as its default CMS for all web properties across the Australian government. I think that's really, really exciting. It's amazing. So what I want to talk about with you in a more roundabout way is that we are in control of this stuff. We're the ones who really, really know how it works, and we have the responsibility to practice successful open source. We really, really need to make safe and secure and private, empowering and compelling experiences for the people who use our stuff. Compelling in this case means beautiful and easy to use, and not super hard to configure, and not really just command line ugly stuff like, you know, a lot of our stuff, our work stuff is. Regular people with regular cell phones don't want to look at all that stuff. They want to hit a few buttons. They want something beautiful and easy to use, and we can do that too. Okay? Are we winning? Are we winning? Well, like I said, the government of Australia just adopted Drupal. That's great for me. It's great for Drupal. There's a lot happening. Headlines like this are awesome to see, right? Another Italian city says goodbye to Microsoft. 170 primary schools in Geneva switch to Ubuntu. French National Police switched 37,000 desktops to Linux. Like, this is great stuff. I think we are winning. I think people are catching on. I live in Germany. The news came out recently. Hamburg could be the next major city after Munich to ditch Windows and Microsoft products. Who knows about the Munich Linux, the Munich open source project? It was kind of amazing. There's a thing called Linux, which is their own Linux distribution. They have a thing called Volmux, which is a form handling document management solution that the city of Munich developed. They helped work on LibreOffice to get it where it needed to be for them. And it's an amazing project. It's really, really great. And I love reading a German politician from the Green Party. I love reading that a politician actually gets what we're about. Check this out. Switching to free and open source software, right? And first of all, she says free and open source software enables innovation and increases security, and the city administration should emphasize this when selecting IT issues. That makes me really hopeful. The city of Gummersbach, the metropolis of Gummersbach, 50,000 inhabitants. This is less than an hour's drive from where I live in Cologne. Didn't make any announcements, didn't put out any tenders. They have an IT department of 3. And they switched the whole city to open source for everything that they could. There are a couple proprietary applications that they're stuck using, but they just went ahead and did it and then announced it when they were done. That's kind of amazing. So against this, of course, the switch to open source will cause dissatisfaction. Right? And the money shot here, wait a minute, let me see. So the UK government recently adopted the ODF format as the standard for government documents. So the open office, LibreOffice, ODF format. Superb, it's a great decision, but there was a lot of lobbying. Before that, Microsoft wanted OOXML to be there as well, but to use OOXML, actually you also have to upgrade to Windows 7 or 8 or 9, and but the decision shouldn't be chosen on the basis of the file formats it supports, but on user productivity. This clearly transcends the cost or otherwise. The company said, wow, well, that's a pretty bold statement. There's video from a recent Adobe Experience Manager conference. That's a CMS. It's a direct competitor to Drupal and other open source CMSs. There's an Adobe executive standing on stage, and she says, the average deal size for Adobe Experience Manager is $450,000, and the average service package on top of that is 2x or 3x. And I heard that, and I thought, well, but user productivity clearly transcends the cost or otherwise of any license, right? How much Laravel can you deliver for $500,000? How much Drupal or WordPress or Symfony can you give a client for $500,000? I really, really think it does matter, okay? And I really don't, I have so much to say about this. So, now, who thinks this is crazy talk? Who think it makes no economic sense at all? Right. This is also happening. This is from 2 weeks ago. This is infuriating. And it's not only infuriating because clearly a very, very, very good salesperson got to the right office at the right time and made a great pitch and convinced them of this insanity, right? But the city of Berlin is using a 2010 version of OpenOffice that's never been upgraded, that has file compatibility problems, right? That's reasonably infuriating. There's a guy in the Drupal community called Jeff Robbins, and he says open source software is not free as in money, it's free as in puppy. You have to take care of it, right? You have to take care of it. It's free as in puppy. So they've done none of that. Now they're complaining that stuff doesn't work. And this room of people here, okay, and when I was talking in Berlin 2 weeks ago, honest to God, if the city of Berlin sent in pizzas and drinks for the weekend, right, we could upgrade their whole infrastructure at the cost of pizzas and drinks, right? They don't have to do this. So if you see this kind of stuff going on in your communities, please volunteer, please help, please pass on the information that, if your particular open source solution or your particular open source version is not doing it for you, there are other choices than going back to the proprietary choices. So, because I really think that the choice between proprietary and free and open source matters, okay? And there are people out there on the web who say that it doesn't, okay? There's a guy who runs his own proprietary CMS that says it doesn't matter if a CMS is open source or proprietary, it's all about features and service. I promise my CMS will do what you need. Nobody cares about the rest, right? User productivity transcends licensing cost. Vincenzo Rubano is an Italian. He's not a high school student anymore. I guess he's about 20. I met him a couple of years ago. He's been blind since birth. This is Vincenzo at DrupalCon Portland. Portland? Portland. I did a couple of podcasts with him. He's fascinating to listen to. Accessibility is usability is one of the things that he said. He speaks in sound bites. He's kind of amazing. Vincenzo runs a website called Ti Tengo d'Occhio. That thing is the URL. Ti Tengo d'Occhio IT. That means I've got my eye on you. And he uses and tests websites and applications for accessibility and maintains a blacklist of projects with problems. That's pretty good. He also works with any developer who wants to work with him to fix and improve those. He'll do all the user testing you want, and he'll tell everyone about it when you get it right. He runs this website on Drupal. He came to our community. He wanted to do this. He came to our community. He found the software. Drupal worked for him accessibility-wise, so he built this Drupal website, and he provides this incredible service to blind users around the world. He also contributes to Drupal in the accessibility issue queue. It's a great story, right? But all we care about is features and service, right? Is that proprietary CMS guy going to give him the website to use? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so. Okay, we're checking our watches. I've got 10 minutes here. Does that sound about right? Okay. I think we're going to come in close. Look, if you have an open source license, it puts you in control. My dad always used to say about the restaurant business here, especially in the US, maybe everywhere, but he said you got to own the bricks. If you're in the restaurant business, what matters is where you are. Once you've set up your place, maybe you're in, well, I live in Europe, so we walk a lot of places, but you get your location set up. People hear about you, people try it, and then they know where, and they're like, hey, when we're driving to there, we could stop there, or when we're shopping at, anyway, we could stop there. You build up a reputation attached to your location, and that makes your success, right? Now, if you're renting the building, the landlord's going to come along and say, hey, man, I love your spaghetti, but at the end of the year, we're sunsetting that database. You can pay me, and I'll migrate your data off of it. Oh, no, wait, he says I'm doubling your rent, right? And what you can't move, you can't move. Because that would, you'd have to start from zero again. You'd have to be in another neighborhood, nobody knows you. So when you build your infrastructure, when you put 5 years into your own startup, like the keynote this morning, and you invest it in technologies that you're not in control of, in infrastructure that you're not in control of, well, it can also be taken away from you, right? And they might sunset that database thing that you've been using and very, very kindly offer you to upgrade you to the new version, but it's also 30% more expensive, and you're screwed, and you're stuck, right? Don't let your government build citizen infrastructure that it doesn't control. Don't build your dreams and visions on something you don't control. You got to own the bricks, okay? Who's heard of Aral Balkan and the Indie Project? Yeah, so I met him and hung out with him, and he's amazing. And he also speaks in sound bites, and I love that. If I have to say trust me, don't trust me, right? Well, we can read the source code. There's a hotbed of radicalism called the Norwegian National Association of Accountants. And Come on. There was a tender, there was a call for comments on the new standard for cash registers in Norway. And the National Accountants Association came in and they said, if you want to prove a transaction record, if you want to prove that you're not avoiding taxes, if you want to have a system that works for the government and for merchants and keeps everybody honest, the only way you can do it is if cash registers are powered by open source standards, right? It's the only way to make it an auditable system of record. Which is great news because Diebold, right? They use blockchain certified, totally open drivers in all of their electronic voting machines in the United States, right? And they're the biggest single contributor, well, no, they're a gigantic contributor to a particular party, right? So, transparency is really, really important. Transparency is important when it comes to things like, well, have you heard about this? Keurig is DRMing your coffee. Now, DRM doesn't have a great track record, right? And if it's a matter of them standing between us and our coffee, how long is that DRM actually going to last? Okay, it's done. Oops, what happened to my slide? Okay, so it's kind of funny, not really. I mean, there are people who bought old Keurig, stockpiled stuff on sale, bought other brands, now it doesn't work. It's a total pain in the ass business model. It's the same reason why printer ink is the most expensive liquid in the world, because HP wants to sell you a printer for $90 and then sell you a printer cartridge for $60. And okay, this is kind of funny and maybe it doesn't matter. This is all about transparency, right? Privacy, safety, transparency. This is what I'm talking about here. Smart thermostats can help us save energy. But if they're remotely controlled by a dictator who figures out that you're protesting somewhere and turns your heat off at home, that's not so safe. Cars already are so digital that they can be remotely hacked and the brakes and the steering can be turned off. Already now. And we don't even have driverless cars. And you know that, and see, I want, right now I'm jonesing for a Tesla. Like crazy I'm jonesing for a Tesla. But I really, really want a self-driving car because I want to be able to go out at night with my friends, because I want to be mobile and involved in society when I'm older. And it's just the most safety, fuel efficiency, resource share, all of that stuff with self-driving cars, right? But you know that the police forces are going to insist on putting intercept codes into those things, right? And there are situations when you cannot trust first of all, there are situations when you cannot trust the authorities in a particular country at a particular time to have your best interests in mind. Especially if you have thought that doesn't match theirs politically or otherwise, it's very dangerous. And governments are terrible at keeping these secrets. How long is it going to take before, somebody hacks the override codes and then you get sent off into God knows where to be taken to pieces, or, it's just... Same with traffic lights. Davey has a Bluetooth hearing aid set. Awesome, right? Plug it into the Roku box, the Apple TV, superb. If those drivers are not open source, if they're not yours to control, right? The next stage of this Fourth Amendment problem that I sort of mentioned is other people will be deciding what you are allowed to hear. Or they'll be listening in with you, right? And logging it. And that can't be good. We need systems that we're in control of, not that are in control of us. And that can only be done through open source. And all of these things have to be safe and secure by default, and we have to be in control of them. We need to know what these computers are doing, all the computers in and around us, and we have to know that they perform faithfully and that they refuse to take orders from remote parties unless we authorize those orders, and that they keep us appraised of what they're doing. That's a quote from Cory Doctorow. There's a potential answer to this. The All-Seen Alliance is making a thing called the All-Join Framework. This is a project by the Linux Foundation. It's pretty super cool. It's a proposal to make a standard to run the Internet of Things, of cars and watches and pacemakers and all that other jazz. And I happen to trust the Linux Foundation, so please look into this. I think it is at least part of the answer to this thing that's scaring me a lot. And remember that what we're doing is about freedom, okay? The digital rights are human rights. We have the right to be safe and secure and private as citizens. I think that open source is the only sane way to build critical systems of any time. I mean, you can't have an architect with a proprietary method for making loading beams, for example, right? That's not okay. You have to be able to look at their sketches. You have to understand what metal they've chosen, and you don't have to just believe that the building's going to stand up. You have to really know. So, all of this, please consider it. Please build your stuff so it does it by default. I really, really believe we care and we are empowered to make this happen. One last thing. My uncle died 5 weeks ago of prostate cancer, my Uncle Howard, and it's the second uncle I've lost to that. So I don't want to lose my dad to that, and I don't want my wife to lose me to that, and I don't want to lose any of you or any of my other friends to that, and it's really fucking horrible. So I'm collecting money for Movember. That's the URL. I did bring cool stickers. And I'm really, really happy to give them out. But if I give you a sticker, please consider, if you can, making a donation. Also because my company's team is really, really competitive. And so, and there are a lot of guys from the sales department on it who are really on. So help me out here, okay? Because, tech side of the house represents, please. So remember that. Thank you very, 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 very much for listening to me. I think I made it in 44 minutes. Thank you.